Greetings! This is the 50th video on this channel, so I decided to do something different to celebrate having the patience to keep doing this. Usually I don't. I am going to talk about why I make ambient music and what my relationship to ambient music is nowadays. So, I've always been drawn to soundscapes and sound design and just sound in general. Even as a kid, I liked making sounds, all kinds of sounds, and listening to them. It didn't always have to be music. Sometimes just sound is enough. I've always been that way. I think it's somehow engraved into my DNA. This led to me paying a lot of attention to movie and video game soundtracks and listening closely to what is happening in the background. And here comes the first important part about the essence of ambient music in my point of view. When I think back to movies that had a nice ambient score that I really enjoyed, I was usually one of the only people in the room that paid any attention to it. And that was most likely by design. I found that people didn't usually actively listen to the ambient soundscape in the background, but if it wasn't there, surely they would notice and the scene would feel empty. This relates to what Brian Eno said about the nature of ambient music. He said that ambient music should be just as ignorable as it is noticeable. I don't think this is the whole truth, but I think it's a good starting point of sorts. I think ambient music can be maximalist and in your face. As a matter of fact, I like that type of ambient a lot, and I tend to also make that sort of thing. But this idea of music being in the background where some people notice it and some don't, and actually even the people that notice it might slip in and out of their consciousness about the music being there. If you catch what I mean. It's very fascinating. I used to think that you always needed to listen to music with your whole body and mind and give it your full undivided attention. Otherwise, it's just cheap space filler and not for proper music fans, or so I thought. That's a bit ridiculous though, isn't it? I think that's a narrow-minded way to approach anything as complex and profound as sound, or any sort of art for that matter. I used to think that music was all about these huge, larger-than-life emotions, and while I still like that kind of delivery a lot and it's very important to me, I've become to think that something like hate, or rage, or simplified uplifting joy, or the raw sense of speed are very simple, surface-level emotions. Those are some of the easiest things to depict in music. So in some way, even though the kind of music that portrays these emotions or aspects of life and existence is very important to me and holds great meaning when it's good, I think the world is also full of music that uses these tools as sort of like this cheap trick. And sometimes it gets boring to me. Now, I am not arguing that ambient music is superior in any way. That's just silly and not the case that I'm making at all. Instead, I am trying to build up to a thesis that I will present in a moment. So, even though the majority of people I interact with outside of my quirky musical bubbles don't really understand what ambient music is and probably think it's pretty boring to listen to, I find it very deep and influential. And I mean influential in the most literal way. I tend to compose music in themes and get stuck in these traditional ways of portraying emotion through sound design, but lately I've been more into exploring the sort of more ambiguous sides of ambient music and delivery. I think that the essence of ambient music resides in how it's able to provide a backdrop for inner journeys and exploring your own feelings and thoughts and your inner world in general. I think that's magical. I think people who are able to do this have found something almost esoteric. I always thought it's like they knew or maybe felt something that other people hadn't found or something. I have to admit though that this might be a compatibility thing where the listener also needs to be open to influence and have this blooming inner world to explore already. So maybe it's the soundtrack of the introverted then. That's a catchy title. Should have gone with that, I guess. I'll just slap it on the thumbnail. I don't know. I don't want to exclude anyone out of this wonderful phenomena, but I can imagine that for the more outwards oriented people, it's probably hard to get anything out of it when it's not as externally stimulating as something like pop or rock music. I don't know. Now I'm rambling though. This is not the point. The point is this, and here comes my thesis. Ambient music is counterculture. Feel welcome to disagree, argue, and converse this with me if you feel like it, but I really believe this to be the case. Let me explain my stance on this. We live in an age where we are constantly bombarded with information, emotions, reactions, arguments, hustle culture, grind set bro bullshit, all of this wild, all-consuming external stimulus. And that can be a lot to bear when you're introverted and have this vivid inner world where you need to return in order to sort of reorient yourself in relation to the external world and chew all this information you've gathered and figure out what it means to you. So all of this nonsense has obliterated our ability to focus, calm down, be still, and just explore being, just being a human being. This is what ambient music to me represents. This is what it tries to achieve. It aims to provide you with a soundtrack to yourself. It doesn't force ideas and emotions down your throat. Well, sometimes it does, but I think that's maybe more of an exception, and the core of ambient music is not in that type of expression. With this soundtrack to yourself, you hopefully have a heightened sense of self-awareness and are able to unwind, untangle your mind, maybe that's a word, I don't know. Anyways, I have grown to truly and utterly loathe and despise the way we live nowadays. Well, most of us in the Western countries anyways. We are hardwired to the internet and its constant dopamine loops, being addicted to not paying attention to ourselves and how we feel and how we perceive ourselves. I think it's self-destructive and it makes us both stupid and miserable. I think we avoid having to navigate the world that is full of pain, misery, desperation, and all these challenges and hardships, but also love, longing, and purpose. We pretend that we are facing those things while being exposed to the internet, but I think it's the opposite. I think that when we are online, we're getting more and more divided, shoved into these bubbles where we can revel in simple surface level feelings and ideas that we share within that bubble, thus avoiding the challenge of facing conflict with confidence and peace. We resort to surface level emotions like hatred and spite instead of building on top of our inner world where we are comfortable with our identity and then meeting the external world as it is presented to us in real life. And this is what, to me, ambient music stands for. It stands for knowing ourselves and learning about ourselves and exploring our rich inner worlds. And that is where the sense of purpose lies. I don't think that fulfillment or the sense of purpose comes from external sources. And that's why cutting out some of the useless noise the world is trying to force upon us is extremely important. To challenge this absurd status quo of distracting ourselves by any means necessary so we don't need to deal with what's inside of us. And this, to me, is the very essence of counterculture. Realizing that there is a hegemony or status quo of twisted norms and rejecting it. So, yeah. Ambient music is counterculture.